Hare Krishna. Very sorry. I'm not sure why we got disconnected. Here I am. Come and listen. We'll try to do this again. It appears that I don't have enough bandwidth to maintain this for some reason. And that's why I lost everybody. Hello? I'm back on. Please come back. Okay. Sorry about the difficulty. I'm back here again. Everyone, please. Good. Stephen Mukunda's come back. Where is Kamala? Kamala has not yet come back. Hopefully, she will be back. Okay. All right. Can everyone see me? Shamarupa's here. All right. So let's start again. I will say the invocation and then I will recite the Gita Mahatmya. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksuranmilitan Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manabhistam Stabitan Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamaya Dadanti Swapadanti Kam. First of all, let me offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Shiksha and Diksha Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Asatara Satasi Simad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And unto my Shiksha and Sannyas Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Asatara Satasi Simad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And I offer my humble obeisances to all of the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who are present here today listening to this lecture on Bhagavad-Gita. We're going to begin with the Gita Mahatmya by Adi Shankaracharya. Gita Shastram Midam Punyam Yapatet Prayata Pumam Vishnu Padam Avapnoti Bhayasoka Divarjita Gita Dhyanyana Shilasya Pranayama Parasya Cha Naiva Shanti Hi Papani Purva Janma Kritani Cha Malane Mochanam Pumsam Jalasnanam Dine Dine Sakrit Gitam Ritam Snanam Samsara Malanashanam Gita Sugita Kartavya Kimanyai Shastra Vistarai Yasvayam Padmanabhasya Mukha Padmadvini Shrita Bharat Amrita Sarvasvam Vishnu Vaktradvini Shritam Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanma na Vidyate Sarvopadi Pani Shado Gavo Dagda Gopalanandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitam Ritam Mahat Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam Eko Deva Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantras Tasya Namami Yani Karmapyekam Tasya Devasya Seva. Okay, so that is the Gita Mahatmya by Adi Shankaracharya. I am going to now recite it in the English language. One with a regulated mind, one who with a regulated mind recites with devotion this Bhagavad-Gita scripture, which is the bestower of all virtue, will attain to the holy abode such as Vaikuntha, the residence of Lord Vishnu, which is always free from the mundane qualities based on fear and lamentation. If one reads Bhagavad-Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. One may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in water, but if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad-Gita, for him the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. Because Bhagavad-Gita is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one need not read any other Vedic literature. One need only attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad-Gita. In the present age, people are so absorbed in mundane activities that it is not possible for them to read all the Vedic literature. But this is not necessary. This one book, Bhagavad-Gita, will suffice because it is the essence of all Vedic literature, and especially because it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By drinking the Ganges water of the Gita, the divine quintessence of the Mahabharata emanating from the holy lotus mouth of Lord Vishnu, one will never take rebirth in the material world again. In other words, by devotionally reciting the Gita, the cycle of birth and death is terminated. All the Upanishads are like a cow, and the milker of the cow is Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. Arjuna is the calf. The beautiful nectar of the Gita is the milk, and the fortunate devotees of fine theistic intellect are the drinkers and enjoyers of that milk. There need be only one holy scripture, the divine Gita sung by Lord Sri Krishna. Only one worshipable Lord Sri Krishna. And only one mantra, Lord Sri Krishna's holy names. And only one duty, devotional service unto that supreme worshipable Lord Sri Krishna. So this is given by Sripad Adi Shankaracharya. And he is explaining here about the glories of the Bhagavad Gita. And we can understand from his teachings that it is very important to understand Bhagavad Gita, which becomes a foundation for the understanding of all other scriptures. Srila Gurudev used to say that Bhagavad Gita is the foundation, and built on that are the 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the 10th canto of Bhagavatam is like the penthouse. And then after that, we have the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so in this way, to understand the glories of the Vedic literature, one must understand the foundation, Bhagavad Gita. So today is Gita Jayanti, which is the birthday or appearance of Bhagavad Gita. The actual fact is that Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna on the first day of the month of Magashirsha. So that was 11 days ago. That is when the battle of Kurukshetra began, 11 days ago. And at that time, Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. However, on the 11th day, today, the great warrior for the Kauravas, Bhishma Dev, was shot full of arrows by Arjuna and was lying there on the battlefield, dying from his wounds. And at that point, Dhritarashtra heard that Krishna, Bhishma was lying on the battlefield dying, and he became very concerned. Dhritarashtra was placing all of his hopes on the power of Bhishma Dev as the greatest warrior of the time to help his sons win the battle of Kurukshetra. So when he heard that Bhishma was lying on the battlefield dying, he became very concerned. The way the battle is set up in those days, the battlefield of Kurukshetra was set up so that a line of demarcation, a field was set up where all the warriors would battle. Then all around that field there were tents where all the kings set up their living quarters, because the fighting only took place during the day. And then at night, all of the warriors would retire to their tents and to their compounds, and they would spend the evening healing their wounds, eating, drinking, and associating with their families. So what was happening is that Dhritarashtra was in a royal tent compound near the battlefield, and he heard the rumors from the battlefield that Bhishma had fallen. So he called Sanjaya. Sanjaya was given divya drishti, divine vision, by his guru, Veda Vyas. Vyasadeva empowered Sanjaya to be able to see things at a distant place and to also see the past, the present, and the future. He gave him Trikala Gana. So with this Divya Drishti, Sanjaya was able to explain to Dhritarashtra what was going on the battlefield. So we see when Dhritarashtra called Sanjaya to speak with him that he asks him in the first verse of the Bhagavad-Gita what is going on. Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samavetaya Yutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimakuravata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after assembling in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do, being desirous to fight? So the word mamaka is very important, because the word mamaka indicates what did they do. So this is past tense. That means it's what happened in the past. In other words, what happened on the first day of Magashirsha, and when Sanjaya was going to see what happened in the past. He was going to see this conversation. He was going to see this discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, and he was going to relate the discussion now to Dhritarashtra so that he could understand what had happened. So this is 11 days into the fight of the Battle of Kurukshetra, the Ekadasi day. And Bhishma has been wounded by Arjuna, and he's lying on the battlefield dying. And now Sanjaya is relating to Dhritarashtra what is this battle, what is the Bhagavad-Gita, what is the discussion between Krishna and Arjuna. Very important. So this is why it's called Gita Jayanti, because the Gita has been now explained to everyone. It appears to the world through the words of Sanjaya. So this is how Bhagavad-Gita appears. Now, we are going to discuss about the structure and development of Bhagavad-Gita. As you know, there are two Gitas that we read from mainly. One is Bhagavad-Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And one is the Bhagavad-Gita that was translated by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. They are based on two different commentaries. Srila Prabhupada talks about, in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, how he offers his appreciation to Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan for writing his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, on Vedanta Sutra, which the Bhagavad Gita commentary that he writes later on is based on, that same Siddhanta. And Srila Gurudev translates the commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, plus he gives his own commentary and the commentary of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So here we see that there are commentaries by Srila Prabhupada, Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Srila Narayan Maharaj. So we're getting many insights and viewpoints. And this is very important because initially, when Srila Gurudev published his Bhagavad Gita, I was myself concerned that why is he making a publication of Bhagavad Gita? We already have Bhagavad Gita as it is. But as I came to understand the importance of his Bhagavad Gita, then I was able to see that both the commentaries were necessary. Just like in the times of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, we see that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur made a commentary on Bhagavad Gita which connected it to the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami and the Gaudiya Vedanta canon. This was very important because at the time, many of the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas did not see the relevance of Bhagavad Gita to the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami and the conception of the Gaudiya Vedanta canon. So what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur did was that he gave an explanation of Bhagavad Gita based on the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami. In other words, showing the connection between the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which was very important. And Srila Prabhupada basing his commentary on Baladev Vidyabhushan, because Baladev Vidyabhushan, he was one of the giants of scholarship in the Gaudiya Vedanta line. Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj explains how he had studied the commentary of Vedanta Sutra from Madhvacharya and the commentary of Vedanta Sutra from Ramanujacharya. And he had taken his initiation as a sannyasi in the Madhvacharya line. So he was a very learned scholar in all of the teachings, and he was able to give some very important explanations about the difference between Mayavadi conceptions and the conception of Dvaita, or two. Shankaracharya taught Advaita. There's one thing. Everything is one. There is no difference between, it's all Brahman. And whatever you see appearing here is only a transformation of Brahman. And this conception of the transformation of Brahman is not acceptable in the Gaudiya Vedanta canon. The Gaudiya Vedanta canon teaches that it is Shakti Parinamvad. Shakti Parinamvad teaches that Krishna has his Shakti, or his energies and his energetic potencies, and that they are the manifestation of this Mayic world and of the spiritual world as well. So therefore, we can understand that this commentary by Baladev Vijayabhushan, although it differed from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, it brought something very valuable to the table of the teachings of Bhagavad-Gita. And at the same time, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary linked Bhagavad-Gita to the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami in the Gaudiya Vedanta canon. So both of these books are very valuable. Both of the Gita commentaries are very valuable, very important. And one should study Srila Prabhupada's Gita first and understand Bhagavad Gita from Srila Prabhupada's perspective and the perspective of Baladev Vijayabhushan. And then after that, one can study Srila Gurudev's commentary on Gita, which has Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Gita. Some of the key differences that we can understand: Srila Prabhupada wanted, his pranam mantra was Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Desh. He came to the Western world to destroy the impersonalistic and nihilistic conceptions of Nirvishesha and Shunyavad, which is the impersonal Brahman, and of the Mayavadi conception, and the Buddhist conception of voidism. So that's what he came to the Western world to preach and to describe and to explain. And so Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan's commentary gave very clear definitions of the difference between Krishna and the Jiva, Krishna and Maya, the Jiva and Maya, the Jiva and the Jiva. Very clear definitions of what the inherent properties of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as the Supreme Brahman and the source of the Brahman, and the Jiva, who is an infinitesimal part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All the inherent qualities of the differences between the Paramatma and the Jivatma are explained in great detail. And so Srila Prabhupada used that as a basis for his commentary on the Bhagavad-Gita. So, Srila Narayan Maharaj, when giving us Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, helps us to understand the distinctions between Sangha Siddha Bhakti, Arop Siddha Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti, etc. And this is very important. These are all fine definitions of the different forms of bhakti. when Srila Prabhupada wrote his Gita and presented it first in 1968 and then 1972, his Gita was presented in such a way that it could inform everyone to engage in sacrificing something at the feet of Krishna and calling it Krishna consciousness. Whether it was Karma Mishra Bhakti or Jnana Mishra Bhakti or Aropsiddha Bhakti or Sangasiddha Bhakti, whatever sacrifice somebody made of the fruit of his work to Krishna, Prabhupada called it Krishna consciousness. So those definitions would have been very confusing for the neophyte devotees in the beginning of their practice of Krishna consciousness. But after almost 40 years, 30 years, when Srila Narayan Maharaj came out with his Gita, we were prepared by our education of Srila Prabhupada's different books and by our education in the different teachings of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and his other books, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his other books. We were educated in how to present, how to understand the differences, the fine differences between the different levels of bhakti. And so that Bhagavad Gita became very valuable and very important. And so we follow first Srila Gurudev's explanation that we should listen and read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita first, and then after that we study Srila Gurudev's Bhagavad Gita. So now we go back to this first verse of Bhagavad Gita, and we read the first paragraph of the purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada had this great ability that within the first paragraph of the book, he could summarize the conception of the book and the understanding of the book and the way to approach and realize the book. So in this first paragraph, he writes, Bhagavad-Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, which I just glorified for you. I just read for you the Gita Mahatmya. There it says that one should read Bhagavad-Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. So this is very important. Here, Srila Prabhupada is making it clear how to understand the Gita. We understand the Gita by scrutinizingly studying it with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna. We cannot understand the Gita without the help of the devotee. The help of the devotee is essential because it is by hearing the transcendental sound vibration from the lips of the devotee that a person realizes the meaning of the words of Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Just by reading alone, you may get some knowledge, but the realization of the mood can only be understood by hearing from a devotee who has developed the mood. And so, this is how we understand Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada explains it right there in the beginning chapter. He also makes a very important point about understanding the Gita without personally motivated interpretations. There are many people who have translated Bhagavad Gita with a personally motivated interpretation. Mahatma Gandhi translated and commented. He made a commentary on Bhagavad-Gita where he says that Bhagavad-Gita teaches nonviolence. How could that be? At the end of the Bhagavad-Gita, Arjuna fights the battle of Kurukshetra. He goes to war. So how could the Bhagavad-Gita be about nonviolence? That is a personally motivated interpretation. There was another person who was a psychiatrist who did a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, and he did it as a metaphor that the field of Kurukshetra means the body, and the Pandavas mean the five senses, and Krishna means the intelligence and the soul. And like this, he gave all of these metaphorical interpretations of the Gita, but this is not actually what the Gita means. This is his own interpretation of understanding Bhagavad Gita. And this is not acceptable in trying to understand the true meaning of Bhagavad Gita. Understanding the true meaning of Bhagavad Gita will only come by one's association with a pure devotee and hearing Bhagavad Gita from his lips, studying it under his direction. This is how we learn Bhagavad Gita. And so, after this, in this paragraph, Srila Prabhupada then says, the example of clear understanding is there in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the way the teaching is understood by Arjuna, who heard the Gita directly from the Lord. If someone is fortunate enough to understand Bhagavad Gita in that line of disciplic succession, without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world. So this is very important, because he is saying here that we have to follow. Again, he's reinforcing the first statement that he made, that the Bhagavad Gita must be scrutinizingly studied under the guidance of a pure devotee. Therefore, he makes this point that if you're fortunate enough to hear Bhagavad Gita from a devotee of the Lord, then you can understand the true meaning of Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, it is not possible. So, he's saying that we should understand it in the line of disciplic succession. And that will be explained in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. There, Krishna explains about the line of disciplic succession. And the next thing that happens is that I wanted to talk about how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur forms the structure of the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, Srila Prabhupada explains about the structure of the Bhagavad Gita in his lecture on Bhagavad Gita, an introduction to Bhagavad Gita that was filmed in Los Angeles. There he says that the Bhagavad Gita is structured that the first 6 chapters and the last 6 chapters are like the book covers, and that the middle 6 chapters are the actual book of Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very simplistic explanation of the structure of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, after this, we have Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, and he says that the first 6 chapters of the Gita are Karma Yoga, the last 6 chapters of the Gita are Jnana Yoga, and the middle 6 chapters of the Gita are Bhakti Yoga. We also have Srila Narayan Maharaja's explanation of the structure of the Gita based on Ramanujacharya's explanation, in which he says that the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-Gita are like a treasure chest, and the last 6 chapters are like the cover of the treasure chest, and the middle 6 chapters are the gems found within the treasure chest. So these are 3 different ways of explaining the structure of the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, we will look at Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation of that structure and try to understand it. So he says that the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-Gita are Karma Yoga. But yet we see that the second chapter is called Karma Yoga. The second chapter and is called Sankhya Yoga. And that the third chapter is called Karma Yoga. And the fourth chapter is called Jnana Yoga. And the 5th chapter is called Karma Yoga Action in Krishna Consciousness. And the 6th chapter is Astanga Yoga, Sankhya Yoga. So we see that they have a different explanation for each of the different chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters. But what is happening here is that if you look at each one of these conceptions, just like when it talks about the Bhagavad Gita in the Sankhya Yoga conception, the first half of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is divided up into 2 parts. Verse 39 of the Gita, Krishna says that now I have explained to you about Sankhya Yoga. And now, from this point forward, I'm going to explain to you about Buddhi Yoga, or how one can renounce the fruit of one's activities. So, this is a very important point, because Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that there is Sankhya Yoga and Buddhi Yoga, and that the fruit of this is to understand how to give up the fruit of your activities to Krishna. So in these conceptions of giving up the fruit of your activities to Krishna, there is also some desire to have the fruit for some fruit for yourself. In other words, first you make the offering to Krishna. Here, Krishna, here is the bhoga which I have prepared, and I'm making the offering to you. Okay, so now there is an offering of bhoga to Krishna, and that bhoga will be transformed into prasadam. But there is a desire by the person who's making the offering to enjoy the fruit of the offering. Something for Krishna, something for me. Similarly, in Karma Yoga, the idea is that I'm making an offering of my knowledge to Krishna with the desire to get moksha or liberation. Something for Krishna, something for me. In Astanga Yoga, in the 6th chapter, when it talks about performing the Eightfold Path, there is a desire for making an offering to Krishna and understanding Vishnu within the heart. But the desire for realizing Vishnu within the heart is either to become Vishnu or to become the Brahman, to merge into the Brahman. So it's something for Krishna and something for me. So therefore, he says that the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita are Karma Yoga, because they're making an offering and at the same time they're expecting some fruit. So this is the conception of why he calls it karma yoga. Jnana yoga, the last 6 chapters, explain how the world works. Because when Krishna talks about bhakti yoga in the middle 6 chapters of the Gita, in the 12th chapter, he makes the point, ultimately, about how one can understand Krishna through bhakti yoga by offering the fruit of one's work in a variety of different ways, through Vaidhi bhakti, through karma yoga, through jnana yoga, etc. So, how many people are actually performing Raganuga bhakti, which is one pointed for the satisfaction of Krishna? Very few. Most of the people are performing regulated devotional service of Vaidhi bhakti. Therefore, in that process of performing Vaidhi bhakti and trying to understand how the world works at the same time, in other words, so that you're performing devotion to Krishna, but at the same time you're within the world and you have to deal with the world and you have to understand how the world works. So therefore, chapters 13 through 18 give us this instruction. It tells us in chapter 13 how the world is structured through Sankhya. It tells us in chapter 14 how the modes of material nature work. It tells us in chapter 15 how the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. It tells us in chapter 16 how there are 2 classes of people, the divine and the demoniac, and how we should try to associate with the devotees and to avoid the atheistic class of men. And it tells us in the 17th chapter how to perform different activities in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance, so that we can always perform our activities at least in the mode of goodness, so that we'll be right next to the platform of devotion. So in this way, the understanding of the Bhagavad-Gita, of dealing with the material world while we're performing Vaidhi Bhakti or Karma Mishra Bhakti or Jnana Mishra Bhakti or different platforms of Bhakti, how we can perform those different platforms of Bhakti and at the same time navigate our way through the material world. Those last chapters, 6 chapters, give us the gyan, the knowledge of how the world works and how we can navigate the material world while we're engaged in the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti, etc. And so, Lenny, you can say that if you want, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that there's different divisions. If you don't like it, please don't listen. Okay, so now we understand. In fact, Srila Prabhupada himself said that there's 3 different planes. Srila Prabhupada said that the first 6 chapters and the last 6 chapters are the cover of the book, and the middle 6 chapters are the actual book of Bhagavad Gita. So Srila Prabhupada says it, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says it, Srila Ramanujacharya says it. If you don't like it, it's fine. You can go somewhere else and make your own speculation. I'm quoting from the Acharyas. Thank you very much. There's no need for you to tell me that the Bhagavad Gita shouldn't be divided when all the Acharyas are saying it's divided. Thank you very much. Okay, so now let's talk about the middle 6 chapters. In the middle 6 chapters, we have the information about how Krishna First, we have Sambandha Gyan in the 7th chapter. Then we have Abhideya in the 9th chapter. And we have Prayojan Tattva in the 8th chapter. So, what happens in the 7th chapter? We're getting instruction in the 7th chapter about Bhagavad-Gita. And that instruction is telling us, Krishna is saying that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he gives the classifications of the two kinds of people. There's 4 people who won't surrender unto him, the atheists and the Mayafrita Jnana and the demons and the Naradamas, etc. And then he gives us Chaturvida Jayanti Mam, Janasa Kritano Arjuna, Artha Jignasha Artha Arti, Gyanicha Bhavatashava. So he gives us in that verse of the Bhagavad Gita the 4 kinds of people who surrender unto him. And those 4 kinds of people that surrender unto him are those who are in distress, just like now we have people who are praying to God in the middle of the country because of the distress they're going through from the tornadoes. So this is one class of person who surrenders to God. Then there's those who are in need of money. And today, with inflation and other problems, there are a lot of people who are praying to God for more money so that they can deal with their needs. And then we have also the Jignasu. Now, the Jignasu are people who have enough money to live their life on a regular basis. They don't have any distresses like calamities and sicknesses, etc. But they're inquisitive to understand if there's something more to life than their comfortable condition. So they're inquisitive. They're Jignasu. They're the inquirers. And then there is Gyanicha, the wise persons, who try to understand what is the nature of the absolute truth of God. And the Gyanis, they are studying the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita for many births in that 7th chapter, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha. After many births, Bahunam Janmanam Ante, Jnananam Mam Prapadyante. Then one finally comes to the platform of surrendering to Krishna and taking up Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, seeing Krishna as all in all. Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha, such a person is considered a Mahatma. So the knowledge of Sambandha Gyan, the relationship between the devotee and Krishna, is explained in the 7th chapter. In the 8th chapter, Krishna talks about the goal. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka, Punaravartino Arjuna, that here there is, in this material world, from Brahmaloka to the lowest planetary system, there is a place of birth, death, disease, and old age. But one who surrenders unto me and attains my abode never returns again to this material world. Okay. So here we see that there is a description of the goal. The goal is to leave this material world, whether you go to Brahmaloka or Patala Loka. You want to get out of this cycle of birth, death, disease, and old age and attain the goal, Punar Janma Navidyate, where one will not return again and take birth in this material world. Krishna consciousness, and he makes a point about Anasuyave, my dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, or I'm going to explain to you the the king of all knowledge. And in the process, in the 9th chapter, he explains Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam. He explains that the Mahatmas, the great souls, are always performing kirtan and the glorification of the holy name of the Lord. And they live in this consciousness. So this is process. This is abhideya. And in the end, he gives Manmana Bhavamad Bhakti Mam Namaskaru. This is the most important verse in the Bhagavad-Gita. It's repeated again in the 18th chapter, verse number 65, in which he says the same thing. Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskaru. Always think of me, become my devotee, remember me, and you will surely come to me at the time of death. And so here is process. Process is being given in the 9th chapter. I'm giving an overview here, so I'm not going to go into great details of every verse. In the 10th chapter, we get the Gita, we get the essence of Bhagavad-Gita, the Chatra Shloki of Bhagavad-Gita, from verse number 8 to verse number 11, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And in those verses, Krishna explains to Arjuna how he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the source of everything, that nothing exists, material or spiritually, without him, that those persons who worship him with love and devotion will be brought closer to him with love. And there are many, many details here which I could explain about the differences between the different commentaries, but we're just giving an overview here. Arjuna ultimately accepts Krishna's authority, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Povitram, Paramam Bhavam, Bahushtam Rishaya Sarve, Devarishi Naradastata. He accepts that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Abode, the Supreme Rest, and the Supreme Person. And he gives evidence of this, that Ahushtam Rishaya Sarve Devarishi Naradastata, that all the great personalities like Narada Muni, Veda Vyas, Ashita Devalo Vyasa, they all accept this position of you as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then Krishna goes on to explain in the 10th chapter his different glories, that he is amongst mountains, he's the Himalayas, amongst bodies of water, he's the oceans, amongst aquatics, he's the shark. Like this, he gives all of these glories. And then Arjuna asks, okay, now you've explained all these glories, I want you to tell me what is the actual, I want you to show me. You're telling me about your glories. I want you to show me your glories. I want you to show me that universal form. And so Krishna does show him the universal form. And Arjuna becomes shaken by seeing this. And then, after being shaken by seeing the universal form, he requests Krishna to return to his four-armed form and then his two-armed form. And this is very important because it now establishes that there are some people who teach that the universal form is the source of the other forms. But this proves that the two-armed form, because when Arjuna sees the two-armed form, he says, now seeing this original form, I am again returned to my original state of consciousness. So it shows that the two-armed form is the source of the four-armed form of Vishnu and the universal form in the material world. And when Krishna finally shows that two-armed form and Arjuna accepts that this two-armed form is the source, Krishna says, Naham Veder natapasa nadane na nachejaya sakyam evam vido drashtam drashtavam asimam yata. You cannot understand this form that you are seeing now by study of the Vedas, Naham Veder, natapasa by performing tapasya, nadanena by giving in charity, nachejaya by doing rituals. You cannot understand. Not possible. It is not possible to understand me in this two-armed form by any of those processes. In the next verse, he explains how you can see and understand the form. Bhaktya tvananyaya shakya aham evam vido Arjuna. By ananya bhakti, bhaktya tvananyaya shakya. By ananya bhakti, then you can understand me, Arjuna. Then you can understand who I am. Gnatvam, you can know me. Drashtam, you can see me. Chatatvena, in truth. Praveshtam cha parantapa, and enter into the deepest mysteries of my understandings. So, this is the process for understanding Krishna, Ananya Bhakti, pure Ananya Bhakti. Now, in the 12th chapter, Arjuna wants to establish one last point. And so he asks Krishna, okay, which form should we worship? Which form will help us to realize the absolute truth? The impersonal Brahman or your personal form as Krishna through devotional service? And Krishna answers very definitively that this two-armed form of Krishna, worshipped through the process of bhakti yoga, is the process for understanding the absolute truth. Klesho dikataras tesham avyakta shakta chetasam avyakta hi dukir avyakta hi vapir dukam, that the impersonal process, the impersonal path of realizing the Brahman is full of dukkha, so many difficulties, so many problems. Dukkam. So we do not want to follow this path, we want to follow the devotional path. That's verse 5. Then in verse 6 and 7 and 8, Krishna explains Raganuga Bhakti, spontaneous devotional service. And in verse 9 he says, if you cannot perform this, then you can perform Vaidhi Bhakti. And if you cannot perform Vaidhi Bhakti, then you can offer the fruit of your work to Krishna. And if you can't offer the fruit of your work to Krishna, then you can do some welfare work for humanity. So like this, Krishna offers the different options. And then, in the end, we see this is why these last 6 chapters come on Jnana Yoga. Because most people will be performing devotional service in Vaidhi Bhakti, Gyan Mishra Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti, etc. And therefore, they need a guide to navigate through the material world while they're performing devotional service. Very important. So, this is the overview of the Gita. I wanted to jump back now to the 2nd chapter of the Gita because it's very important. We talked about the 39th verse of that chapter, which separates the two halves of the 2nd chapter. And in the first half, after Arjuna finally surrenders to Krishna, when he accepts that Krishna is his guru and his teacher, and not just his friend, he ends the friendly talks. Then, at that point, he begins the process of explaining to Arjuna what is the difference between matter and spirit and the controller of both. And he tells him, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. He makes the distinction that as jivas, we are separate entities from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I, Krishna, am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There was never a time when I did not exist, nor when you, Arjuna, did not exist as a jiva, nor when all these kings did not exist as separate jivas. So he establishes the principle of the separation of all the jivas, Mamaivam so jivaloke, jiva bhuta sanatana. All these jivas are my eternal parts and parcels, and Krishna is waiting for you to turn your face to him so that you can return to the proper state of consciousness, as Arjuna says, now seeing you in your original form, I'm in my original state of consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So then he gives so many explanations about the soul. This first part of the second chapter is amongst all scriptures in the world. And this is why Prabhupada says when one understands Bhagavad-Gita through this process, it exceeds all other scriptures in the world. Because there's no scripture in the world, not the Bible, not the Quran, not the Buddha text, not the Sikh text, not any of the texts that give the kind of definition of the nature of the soul and how the soul works than this section of Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter. It explains in great details that the soul has no beginning and no end. It is never withered by wind, nor cut by any weapon, nor wet by water, nor blown by nor burned by fire. There is nothing material that can touch the soul. The soul is transcendent to this material world. So this sheds light now on the importance of the 39th verse, where Krishna is telling him, now I've explained to you Sankhya Yoga, the difference between matter and spirit and the controller of both, so that now you understand you're not your body. Now that you understand you're not the body, now I'm going to explain to you Buddha Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, which will tell you how to offer the fruit of your work to Krishna. How can you become detached from the fruit of your work if you think you're the body? That's why the first instruction is you're not this body. You're the soul. By understanding this instruction, then you can understand how to become detached from the fruits of your activities in the material world. Without understanding you're not the body, you cannot do that. If you think that you're the body, then you will think, well, I've done this work, therefore I should now get the fruit of that work for myself. I should enjoy the fruit of the work. But if you understand you're not the body, then you can understand that the fruits of your work should be offered to Krishna. So this is why, this is the importance of this 39th verse and the importance of the first part of the second chapter. And then in the second part of the second chapter, after Krishna describes to Arjuna what state of consciousness one has to be in to be detached from the fruits of his work, in the 54th verse of the second chapter, Arjuna asks Krishna the first question. What is the nature of someone who has become such a muni, who has an understanding of this? What does he look like? What does he act like? How does he walk? How does he talk? How does he sit? How does he eat? How does he sleep? Arjuna wants to know what are the activities and behaviors and qualities of a person who has achieved this state of consciousness. So this is the first question of 16 questions in the Gita. And Srila Narayana Maharaj, in his commentary on the Gita, gives the 16 questions all in that commentary. So the 54th verse of the second chapter is very important, and the commentary by Srila Narayana Maharaj on that verse is very important, because in that commentary he gives the 16 questions, and this is the understanding of what drives the narrative of the Bhagavad Gita. The narrative of the Gita is Arjuna asking questions and Krishna giving answers to his questions and explaining the Bhagavad Gita based on the questions of Arjuna. So this is what drives the narrative of the book. And to understand the narrative of Bhagavad Gita, one should study those 16 questions so that one can understand how Krishna is answering them. So that, because the questions are as good as the answers. Sukadeva Goswami says this in his talks with Parikshit in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says the questions are so good. The questions are so good. They're as important as the answers. So we should study that. Remember it. Second chapter, verse 54, the commentary of Srila Narayana Maharaj. This will tell us what are the 16 questions of the Gita that drive the narrative of the Gita. And so in this way, we see the importance of that opening chapter, the second chapter of the Gita. And then we see Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmanam Shadavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatamomata. This is the last verse of the sixth chapter of the Gita, where Krishna explains to Arjuna that I've talked to you about all these different yogis, Sankhya yogis, Buddhi yogis, Karma yogis, Jnana yogis, Jnana Mishra yogis, Karma Mishra yogis, etc., Astanga yogis. I've explained to you about all the yogis. But now I'm telling you, Yoginam api sarvesham. Sarvesham means amongst all kinds of yogis. Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmanam, who is most intimately united with me in a heartfelt manner. Through what process? Bhajate. By performing bhajan, by performing bhakti yoga. Bhajate yomam. Sa me yuktatamo mata. He is the supreme yogi. He is the greatest amongst all yogis. He is the superior yogi who is performing bhakti yoga. So then, after explaining that, Krishna leaves these 6 chapters behind. Arjuna asks the next chapter to open up, next question to open up the 7th chapter, and then we get the Sambandha, the Prayojan, and the Abhideya. And we see that here, that Krishna is also giving this process, Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan, in the 7th, 8th, and 9th chapter. And then he's establishing the authority of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the 2-armed form, and the authority of Bhakti as the supreme process of devotion. And then we go to understanding the general knowledge of how one can practice Bhakti Yoga within the world. And then at the end, Mammana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskaru. We understand that the process of surrendering to Krishna like this is the highest and best process. So this is a basic overview of Bhagavad Gita. This is a basic understanding of how it's structured. how the questions that drive the narrative of the book, and so that we can better understand and study Bhagavad Gita in a way that it will bear more fruit for us to build a greater foundation upon which we can understand Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So now we can start to understand also. We can ask some questions now. Okay, the questions are given by the devotees. I already answered Lenny Sislak's question. If any of you have any other questions that you want to ask, then we can ask them now. I see my dear friend Rosella Rukmini Lozi is there. So many devotees are there. Nandini and Radha Govinda Dasi and Sunan and Carmine Goravani, Nandi Himalaya, Deepak Bazar, Stephen Mukunda, Richard Strong from New Zealand, Jessica, Stephen Mukunda Das, and Shamali and Shamananda and everybody. So many nice devotees are here. And if we have some questions, if you want to ask a quick question about Bhagavad Gita, I want to thank you for all of you for coming. Please ask your questions. I'm looking now at the comment section, waiting for a question from somebody so that I can answer it for you. Why is the Bhagavad Gita a song? Are Arjuna and Krishna singing to each other? Yes, Bhagavad Gita is a song because the Sanskrit language is basically sung. So like the first verse, Dhammakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yayutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimakuravata Sanjaya Yada Yada Hidharmasya Glanirbhavati Bharata Abhutanam Sadharmasya Tadatmanam Srijamiyaham. So like this, we see that there are different ways of singing the verses of Bhagavad Gita. And by singing those verses, we get the concept of Gita, or song. The verses are sung in Sanskrit. And that is why it is called Bhagavad Gita, the song of Bhagavan. Yes, Radha Govinda Dasi, Sunanda, Radha Govinda Das Sunanda Devi Dasi. Is there a feminine aspect to the Bhagavad Gita, the name Gita, Maharaj? In the 10th chapter of the Gita, there is some discussion in the Chatra Shloki. And the Chatra Shloki actually talks about, if we listen to Srila Sridhar Maharaj's commentary, I would encourage you to read the commentary of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Just go to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, right in the Google, Srila Sridhar Maharaj's commentary on Bhagavad Gita, or about Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Bhagavad Gita. And we look at that commentary and we see Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mat Sarvam Bhartate. We see that this verse of Krishna that's speaking, that Srila Sridhar Maharaj actually attributes that to being Radhadasyam. Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha. He says that this bhav means that one is in the bhav of Radhadasyam. And then in the next verse, where he talks about Sridhar Maharaj's commentary is based on his own transcendental realization. It's not based on any other commentary of anyone. And then he talks about how when we see the understanding of Bhagavad-Gita, Ramanya Cha, Tushanti Cha, Ramanya Cha, Santi Cha, Tushanti Cha, that there is the understanding of the meaning of Bhagavad Gita, the meaning of the two forms of devotion, which is Vatsalya Ras and Madhurya Ras. And then after that, in the next verse, Tesham Sutata Yuktanam Bhajatam Prishi Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yenamam Upayanti Te. Upayanti, how can you become nearer? If you're already Tushanti Cha Ramanti Cha, if you're already performing Ramanti Cha, if you're already in Buddha Bhava Samanvita, and you're already performing Ramanti Cha, intimate devotion and Madhurya Ras to Radha and Krishna, then Upayanti Cha, how does Krishna bring you nearer? Sridhar Maharaj says that he brings you near Upapati. He makes you a paramour. He takes you out of the understanding of being the wedded wife of Krishna to the being the lover of Krishna. And so all of this Madhurya Ras Katha is given by Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj in his commentary on the Gita. And you can now read this commentary and understand the depths of it. Rukmini is asking, what is the most important sloka of Bhagavad Gita? Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto Majiji Mandamaskaru. That is 934, the last verse of the 9th chapter, and 1865. It is repeated twice. It is the only verse in the Gita that is repeated twice. So therefore, it is the most important verse of the Bhagavad Gita, according to Srila Narayana Maharaj. Did everyone who saw Lord Krishna in the Mahabharata war attain liberation? Yes, according to their state of consciousness and their relationship with Krishna, they attained a form of liberation. Yes. All right. It is 1:45 now here in Central Time in Houston, Texas. Thank you very much for your hearing Bhagavad Gita today on Gita Jayanti and for your words of appreciation. Thank you, Lenny, for saying it was a nice class. I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much for everything. I greatly appreciate all of the devotees who came to hear today and your appreciation of Bhagavad Gita. This class will remain on my page. And tonight at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time, and 3 p.m. Hawaii Time, I will be giving, again, basically the same class. A little differently, spoken a little differently, but basically the same class. So you can either listen to this class again, or you can hear the next one coming at 9 o'clock. I did this one specifically for the devotees in Europe, for my dear disciple Kamala Devi Dasi, Kamala Manjari Devi Dasi, and all the Italian devotees, Rukmini and Jessica and Madhava, and all the wonderful Italian devotees. I did this class for them and for the other devotees in Europe who would not be able to hear it at 7 p.m. tonight. And so I hope you enjoyed the class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Gurudev, all glories to all the great devotees. Jai Sri Krishna, Jai Bhagavad-Gita, Hari Hari Bol, Hari Hari Bol.